Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him and twisted them together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him: "This is Jesus, King of the Jews."
Two rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God."
Thank you, readers. That was beautifully read. Last Sunday, Ruth shared with us about Palm Sunday, wonderfully presented to us how Jesus came into Jerusalem triumphantly, and they were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." That was Sunday, and now it's Friday, and they're coming to get him. When the Jewish leaders decided to arrest Jesus with the intention of putting him to death, they sent a detachment of soldiers. Now that's about 600 fully armed men to arrest one man in a garden. They were taking no chances. On a previous occasion, during the Feast of Tabernacles, the Jewish leaders sent the temple guards to arrest Jesus, and they came back empty-handed. And the Jewish leader said, "Where is he? Why haven't you brought him back?" And the guard said, "We couldn't. Nobody has ever spoken words like he has done. We just couldn't possibly arrest him." They were captivated. And of course they were. They were listening to the word of God, spoken by the living word of God. And those guards came back empty-handed because there's no way they could pick Jesus up because the word of God overwhelmed them. This time they were taking no chances. 600 of them came after Jesus. And the thing is that when they came to get Jesus, he was expecting them. He wasn't taken by surprise. He wasn't hiding away from them. He saw them coming and he stepped out and he said to them, "Who is it you're looking for?" And they said, "Jesus." And he said, "Here I am. I'm the one that you're after." He was waiting for them. He was ready. And he made sure that the disciples were free to go. And when he said, "Here I am," John's gospel records that such was the power in his word that the guards all fell backwards and they had to get themselves up because the power of his word was spoken to them. So Jesus wasn't hunted down. They came and arrested him at night, and they shouldn't have done that. That was against the Jewish law. So it was an illegal arrest that they made. And he was taken before the Jewish leaders, and false and contradictory evidence was brought before him. Jesus was entirely innocent of any charges that they made against him. Not that that mattered, because the Jewish leaders' minds were already made up, and he was going to be put to death. Because the lamb was under the rule of the Romans, they couldn't actually implement the death penalty themselves. They had to get permission from the Romans to do this. So they sent him over to Pilate, the Roman governor, who was actually in Jerusalem because of the feast the feast of Passover. He was there to make sure that nothing bad happened, as it were, just to make sure the peace was kept. And so they came before Pilate, and Pilate. His spies and informers would have kept him up to date of any high-profile events that were going on during this important event. And he would have known about Jesus, and he would have had a good idea of who he was. And he was fully aware of Jesus' popularity and his presence and how that annoyed the religious leaders. Pilate knew that they were jealous of Jesus and that they just wanted to get rid of him. And he knew that they were using Pilate and in his position to their own ends. So Pilate, he withdrew to another room to talk to Jesus. The Jewish leaders wouldn't go in there because that would have been against the Passover regulation. If they'd have been in the presence of Pilate, that would have made them unclean. Such was their religious rules of the time. The Jewish leaders increased the pressure on Pilate, claiming he was no friend of Caesar if he didn't invoke the death penalty to kill Jesus. So Pilate sees Jesus and he says to him, "So you're the king of the Jews." In these situations, the defendant would either be quite aggressive, he could be angry, threatening, defiant, or perhaps pleading for his life. Jesus stood before Pilate in all his composure, in all his majesty, in all his authority, calmly and simply answered Pilate's questions. He even asked Pilate a question himself. "Yes, it is as you say," says Pilate, "I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom Jesus leads is an eternal spiritual kingdom, and its place is in heaven. Its headquarters are in heaven." Pilate was only ever interested in this world and those who were against Rome and Roman rule. He wasn't bothered about where Jesus was actually coming from. Was Jesus a threat? Well, as Ruth clearly mentioned last week, Jesus came in riding on a donkey. That was nothing threatening, and Pilate knew that. Pilate is confronted with an innocent man. But Pilate has to deal with an angry, hostile group of local leaders wanting Jesus dead. And then he has to confront the mob shouting for Jesus to be crucified. Pilate's in Jerusalem to make sure the Passover goes peacefully. And so far, things aren't looking good. What if a riot happens? This won't look good at all. And he was also, the Romans understood about religious things, about gods and the supernatural. And Pilate was actually concerned, what if Jesus actually is God? So Pilate's now under pressure. And then Matthew's gospel points out that his wife sends him a message. And his wife says to him, I've had a nightmare about this man Jesus. Have nothing to do with him. He is an innocent man. So she's having one of her weird dreams as well, on top of all of this. Pilate's under pressure. In amongst all this, Jesus explains to Pilate the reason he left his kingdom to arrive here. In John chapter 18, verse 37, Jesus says, "For this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me," said Jesus. Pilate's response, famously, "What is truth?" Jesus doesn't ask Pilate for anything. He's not looking for his freedom. He's not looking for his life to be saved. He's not trying to engage in a plea bargain where he might get a lesser sentence. The only thing that Jesus asks Pilate to do is to consider the truth. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me." Jesus also said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Pilate is standing there with Jesus. Pilate asked the question, "What is truth?" Pilate, it's stood in front of you. Jesus is the truth. He's there looking at you right in the face. Jesus, in all of this enormous event that's going on, Dan mentioned it's the most significant event in history. I'm an amateur historian. I love history, and it is the most historical event. In amongst all that's going on, all the pressure that Jesus is under, all that he has to do, all of his destiny, all the things that Jesus is called to do, he's standing in front of Pilate, and they're in this room on their own, and he's saying to Pilate, "Just consider the truth. Here's your opportunity." By now, Pilate doesn't know what to do. He's confused. He's anxious. He's frightened. He doesn't know what's happening. Jesus knows exactly what's happening and what he has to do. He knows that he is headed for the cross. Jesus knows what's going on. Pilate doesn't know what to do. Pilate's scared. Pilate's frightened. Jesus is ready for all of this to happen. So Jesus chose the cross and willingly went there to die. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't that he just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. This was God's purpose for mankind, for you and I. Jesus chose the cross and he went there willingly. Pilate, in full knowledge of Jesus' innocence, hands him over to be unlawfully executed. They took him, he was tortured, beaten, humiliated, and hung on the cross between two proper criminals, and there he died. Whoa. The Roman centurion guarding the scene is terrified. And he claims, surely this was the Son of God. All sorts of things are going on. The dead are coming back to life. There's an earthquake, there's thunderstorms, everything's kicking off. And this Roman soldier is standing there and he can see Jesus up there on the cross. He can see Jesus hanging there, and a revelation comes to him, and he realizes that this must have been the Son of God. What he sees is something of the glory of God. He sees the glory of God on that cross. And you know, folks, one day every eye will see. Every eye will see that wonderful glory of who Jesus is, and every knee will bow. Every knee will bow before the throne of God, and every tongue will confess that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's yet to come. That's yet to come. So why did Jesus do this? That's a good question. When I first heard the gospel and heard about the things of Christianity, and I heard about Jesus, and I heard the story, and I heard all this, and then it was made clear to me that Jesus did this for me personally. You know, he did it for the world, did for everybody, but my name was on the ticket. And I thought, why on earth would you do this? Why would you do this for me? I wouldn't do it for me. But he decided that this is something that was right, because he wanted to renew that relationship between mankind and God. He wanted to be the way that we can come back to the Father, that we can be in a place of harmony and happiness and joy, in a right place with God. And that was the reason for the cross, because the cross was the price that had to be paid to enable all the sin that had been committed throughout history and individually for what we've done wrong. That price had to be paid. And Jesus went to the cross and gave himself. He wasn't taken or forced. He voluntarily decided this was a good thing to do because I want to put this right. I want to pay the price for the fact that all of this has gone wrong. I'm going to be the answer. And he's the answer. If we accept that answer into our lives, then we are liberated and set free from the sin that condemns us. Jesus is the condemnation. He took all of the blame, all of the responsibility, all of the effect of that sin upon himself, and he went to the cross, paid the price. The debt was paid. Debts are paid. So we're free now because of that action, that wonderful historic action that Dan mentioned. We are free to do that now because of something that Jesus had done. The price had been paid. You know, the death of Jesus dying, the fact that he died, the fact that he's dead, okay? It's Friday and now he's died. He died on that cross, dead. He really was dead. He died on the cross. That would have been enough. That absolutely would have been enough for us. And what could have happened is they could have, well, what they did do is they took his body from the cross and they took it to a garden and they put it into a new, freshly made tomb, and they put him in the tomb and they sealed the tomb. They sealed it and they guarded it so that nobody could go in and nobody could come out. Again, they're taking no chances. But that would have been enough. And years later, Jesus being dead, years later, people would have come to the grave and they would have laid flowers and they would have put little statues and they would have set up a memorial to the fact that Jesus had died and paid the price so that we're free. And it would have been lovely in the garden, especially in springtime with the blossom and with all the crocuses coming up, and people could have come and they could have remembered the death of Jesus. There's only one big problem with all of this thinking. The grave couldn't hold him. Death could not hold him. I'm not going to steal any thunder, but you have to come back on Sunday to hear what happens next. But Jesus died, but it wasn't the end of the story.